Okay. Hi everyone, and thanks for coming to the talk today. So this is the second talk that we have done on our in our webinar series for our Older Horse Month that we're running this month. And today we have Emily talking to us. Emily is the head of Equine and Smallholder Nutrition at Allen & Page, which is a feed company that I'm sure many of you have heard of before. Emily's going to be talking to us today about feeding and nutrition in the older horses and ponies. So hopefully you will all find this interesting. And also, if anyone wants to try any samples of the feed, either get in contact with us or Allen & Page, as they've kindly given us some free samples that we can provide you. So you can give your horses a taste and see if they like them. Cool. Well, I'll let Emily take over. Oh, and we're going to do a question and answer session at the end. So any questions that you have, Emily can answer them at the end. Cool.
So many thanks to Hannah and to Ryan for inviting me here today. My name is Emily Smith, and I'm head of Equine and Smallholder Nutrition at Allen & Page Horse Feeds. And for anyone who isn't aware of our company, we're part of the Beta NOPS scheme. So anyone who's competing, and you can be competing with an older horse, as we all know, we're part of that Beta NOPS scheme, which means we reduce the risk of contaminants in the feed. We also use non-genetically modified ingredients in our feed, and we're Vegetarian Society approved. And we also run a drug-free mill. So ponies and have a think about the different areas that we need to consider. One of the main things is the activity level, how much you're able to do with your horse or pony, their body condition, their appetite. That does affect how much they're able to eat, how much energy they've got if you need to increase that, the condition of their teeth, their veterinary health issues. Some of them have some of them don't, and do very well into older age. Also, if there are any feed intolerances, some of these can develop as they get older, and then ultimately what feed to choose. So first off, the activity level, and I thought it was quite important to put this in because you can have an old 17-year-old or a very young 27-year-old, and we do have people who ring us and say they've decided to retire their 24-year-old. He or she has done all the work they feel they need to do, and the horse is now turned out in a field. And what you can find is that they can do very well and stay being very active or in gentle, regular work right up until their early 30s. Even things like gently walking or trotting up hills. You can do walk-in-hand work. We have some retired people who will walk their horses up and down hills to keep them going. Even things like being on the bit, down and around, working the hind end in, as I said, a walk or a trot. It keeps their musculature strong, and that's so important as they get older. So keep that in mind. If you've got a horse that's otherwise well and is able to do some work, and as we know with arthritis, it can help if you keep them active in a gentle way, in a regular gentle form of exercise. It can help them. And don't forget, there's not just the physical well-being, it's also the mental well-being for your horse. If they're left behind and you're going off and hacking somebody else or regularly working somebody else, and they see that, I mean, consider their mental well-being as well as their physical well-being, because they can do very well, as I said, in gentle, regular work as they get older. And nowadays, there's a new old, and they aren't really old until they're in their early 30s. So the other thing to think about is body condition, and this links very closely into their breed and body type. If you have a slim thoroughbred, and he or she is a slim thoroughbred as an adult, as an older horse, they're going to continue being slim. So you wouldn't expect them to be carrying extra weight. You'd want them to stay that way. You're also looking at how they are from their health perspective, and also how much work they've done in the past, as well as how much they're doing at the moment. That's what I refer to with their musculature and why it's so important to keep them strong as they get older. And the other aspect is that if they have an endocrine system problem, then they are more likely to either go from being a good doer to a poor doer, or they can be a poor doer and suddenly in a couple of seasons become very good. So keep in mind that you've got those considerations as well when you're looking at their body condition scoring. And we've got people in our company who can come out and visit you to help you with that, because it can be quite difficult if you've got an older horse, just to get it right and make sure that you've got the right fat cover and the right muscle cover. So the other thing to think about is appetite. Some horses are more prone to being picky and fussy eaters, and others eat very well, and that can become a problem if, for example, you're trying to put weight on a horse. Some of them absolutely love their food, and it makes it very easy when we've got these different ingredients that we include in the feeds. And if you, for example, use warm water when you soak the feeds, you get the extra aroma coming out as well as the extra flavor. So that can be extremely helpful for anyone who's a picky or a fussy eater. Keep in mind when they're, if they're older and they've got equine Cushing's, one of the things that can happen is their appetite can change and also their palate can change. So you might find that you need to have a bit of a larder. And by that I mean you might use extra mint in the feed, or you might use table salt. Unsweetened juice is another way of helping change the flavor of a feed. I mentioned here a grated carrot or an apple, and make sure you mix it into the feed. And you can swap around flavors. So you could have one flavor for breakfast, one flavor for supper, one flavor for lunch. And that can help anyone who's become fussy or who's a bit off their feed. And it just helps get them going again. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting them going and then they start eating and they're fine. But this is all part of keeping them active and keeping the energy going in so that you're able to do some work with them and keep them fit and well. So the other aspect to an older horse is the condition of the teeth. We have people who ring up to say they've having trouble with their incisors of the front teeth, the back teeth. They can have gaps in the teeth, gaps in the mouth. And we have some people who have horses who are young horses with problems with teeth. And this is where using one of our soaked feeds is so useful. You can add what we require is that you add the recommended amount of water, and then you can add more water so you can make it nice and warm and soupy. Some horses absolutely love a nice soupy feed and do very well with that. And the other thing about that is that one of our feeds in particular called fast fiber can be used as a partial fiber replacer. So if you've got somebody who's not feeling terribly well or needs some help and you wanted to try and increase the forage in their diet, if they can no longer manage long stem forage, for example, that's where you can have one tub as the feed, and then a second tub can be the soaked fiber replacer, fast fiber. And you can feed this, for example, you could feed fast fiber 4 times in the day if you're able to, or 3 times in the day, and their main feed twice a day. And that, I think, also helps with motivating them to eat if you're having trouble with that. And as I said, you can change the flavors, so have that sort of spice and fruit larder that you've got to help them with eating. So I mentioned earlier about veterinary health issues and how that can impact on the choices that you need to make when you're feeding a horse. And anytime you've had laminitis with a horse or a pony, I think it's really important that going forward, you treat them as a laminitic. Even if it was to do with something else, I think it's not worth the risk using a feed that might cause laminitis in the future. So all of the recent research indicates that you need to look at nice low levels of combined sugar and starch. And that comes in at, all the recommendations say less than 10%, so 10% or below. That's really important going forward, and that's also important for anyone who's got equine Cushing's, which is also, as we know, called PPID, anyone who has equine metabolic syndrome, and anyone who has any kind of insulin dysregulation. So it's really important to keep those sugars and starches nice and low. And the way you help the horse or pony to put weight on if they need it, or to maintain healthy weight, is you look at what's called a fiber and an oil route. And by oil, I mean vegetable oil. And there are also oils in our feeds, in particular linseed, which, as we all know, is a lovely oil because it's got nice high levels of omega-3 in it. And essentially what you do is you replace the energy you're getting from starch, and you replace that energy with oil. And as we all know, oil is a very calorific, very dense calorific feed. So just to give you a reminder, you're looking at around 120 calories in a tablespoon, for example, of olive oil. So there's a lot of energy there to be had, and horses digest oil extremely well. So this is a way that you keep the weight on, and you keep healthy weight on, especially those that need that nice low sugar and starch diet. So as I said, you want the fiber and the oil, and keep the sugar and starch combination below 10%. Now, feed intolerances are one that you can have a problem with ingredients all through the horse or pony's life. And other times you can find that as they get older, they become particularly sensitive. Things like high sugar or high starch. High sugar, that would be more related to trying to avoid problems with laminitis. Starch can cause problems, as we all know, with hindgut acidosis. If you're riding an older horse, you can generally do extremely well and keep the weight on very well, as I said, with that fiber and oil route. Molasses is one to avoid, especially if you've got a laminitic, and it can also cause upset, or I should say loose droppings is the best way to put it. So you're better off avoiding molasses. And the other one that you want to stay away from are the whole grains, because again, they've got very high starch levels. So when thinking about all those things together, the sort of feed choices you're looking at from our range, if you need to keep that sugar and starch less than 10%, so again, if you've got a laminitic or one that's had laminitis in the past, any kind of insulin issues, so any kind of endocrine problems, so equine metabolic syndrome, PPID is another one, then you're looking at that less than 10% for sugar and starch, and you'll get that with the fast fiber, Veteran Light, and L-Mix. Now, both fast fiber and Veteran Light are soaked feeds. And as I spoke earlier, what you can do is use Veteran Light as a feed for, say, breakfast and supper. And you can put fast fiber in as a separate tub if you want to, because it makes it a bit more exciting, especially if your horse loves the feed. They get very excited about 2 buckets each time you feed them. You can also combine the feeds if you want. That's no problem at all. If you find you've got somebody who is very keen on eating or isn't so, you can balance that out by breaking up the feeds or putting them all in one bucket. And the other thing you might find is they might really like a sloppy feed as well as something else, and that's how you can provide a bit of variety during the day. If your horse doesn't have any problems with their teeth, then you could look at our nice low sugar and starch muesli mix, which is called L-Mix, and we just suggest that you dampen it. Now, if you're okay with slightly higher levels, but still relatively very low levels of sugar and starch, then the feeds to choose where you can provide nice levels of energy, but again, from more of a fiber and oil route, are feeds like Veteran Vitality. You might have heard of this feed. Again, it's a soaked feed. It's a really nice one to help maintain weight. We've also got Soothe and Gain, which is particularly for horses who've had digestive problems in the past, or if they're prone to digestive upset. That's a really nice one. Nice high calorie feed. And as I said, it's got very, very low starch levels. So it's slightly higher than what we would recommend if you've ever had laminitis, but it's still relatively very low in starch and sugars. And another one that's extremely good for helping with weight gain and maintaining condition is Cool and Collected. And again, that's a soaked feed for those that are in medium work, needing a bit of help to gain weight. So to summarize, if you've got a horse that's, for example, as I said, prone to any kind of endocrine issues, or you've got problems with laminitis, or as a healthy way going forward, keep that nice low level for your starch and sugars. You want to choose quality protein from, as I said, the ingredients like linseed Fiber and oil are also very nutrient dense, especially as the oil comes in at 2.5 times the rate of, for example, corn. And it's especially good for those who have very small appetites. So you're getting a really nice nutrient dense feed. You want to use oil for healthy body weight gain and also for healthy body weight maintenance. And just to give you an idea, if you are looking to put weight onto a pony, for example, you would gradually introduce, say, 30 mils in the morning, 30 mils in the evening. If you're a horse, you're looking at around a starting rate of around 50 mils in the morning, 50 mils in the evening. And the source of oils you're looking for, linseed is quite a tricky one because it's quite prone to what the best phrase is going off. You have to keep it in the fridge. It's quite difficult to find. It's also quite expensive. It's a lovely oil and we add it to our feeds, but it's been stabilized in our feeds. If you can find it, you need to keep it in your fridge, as I said, but ones that are easier to find are things like, for example, rapeseed oil, and that has a nice level of omega-3 fatty acids in it, as linseed does. Those sort of oils are very easy to find. You can pick them up at the supermarket and you can usually buy them in quite large quantities. And the other point is, don't give up on them. Keep their activity levels up. That's really important, I think, for both their mental and their physical well-being. And the other thing about it is that if you keep them working and you keep them exercising, you're keeping their muscle tone up. And that's really important as an older horse. You're less likely to get that typical sway back that you get, for example, especially if you've got a horse with Cushing's, and you help them with the way their body uses energy. And that helps them in the long term to hold good, healthy condition. So what I'd like to do now is pause, and if anyone has any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them, and see how we go from there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Emily. I'll just have a look in the question section. So if anyone has any questions at this point, feel free to just type them in. There's a bit on the bottom of the screen. Okay, we've had one question, Emily. Your thoughts on feeding an older horse calm and condition?
So it's, as I said, if you've ever had an incident of laminitis in the past, common condition has higher levels of sugar and starch. So I would recommend that you drop down to a lower level of sugar and starch and choose one of those three. If you've got issues with teeth, then you've got a choice of fast fiber and veteran light. And just to make things a little bit relative for you, I have owners who've got young horses who've got endocrine issues, and these are young warm bloods, for example, and they do extremely well on a mix of fast fiber in a separate tub or mixed in if you want, and then veteran light. And veteran light is like veteran vitality. It's just got very low levels of sugar and starch. And then we put oil in the diet, and we also put things like micronized linseed, and they do extremely well at medium to hard levels of work. So you're absolutely fine if you haven't got any problems with, as I said, insulin sensitivity, then yes, by all means, feed common condition. But if you do, then swap over to veteran light or fast fiber.
And then would you need a balancer with that?
So all of our feeds contain a balance of vitamins and minerals as long as you feed at the recommended level for their workload. So don't go below rest level. So this is one of the joys of having a ready-made feed as opposed to having to mix it up yourself. We have all the vitamins and minerals you need in there, and that's what I've mentioned in all of the feeds in our range. So as long as you're feeding at the recommended level, you don't need to add anything else. And I wouldn't recommend you do. I think it's important to keep things simple. Don't confuse the issue, especially if you've got a horse that's prone to any kind of digestive upset. You want to keep things nice and simple. It also makes it easier in the feed room.
Okay, and then what would you recommend for a calmer?
For a calming supplement?
I think that is the question, yes.
Okay. So the calming supplements that are out there generally look at increasing the levels of magnesium in the diet. The feeds we've got contain the balance of magnesium that is required for a nice healthy horse or pony. If you have a fizzy horse, one of the first things I would do, and that refers to the previous question, is have a look at what you're feeding. And one of the first things I would suggest is take anything extra out. So if you've got your protein levels too high, for example, have a look at where your protein sources are coming from. Some people feel, for example, that alfalfa causes heated behavior. Take out molasses, for example, because that can cause problems, as well as problems with the digestive system. And also take out any whole grains. So you want to have nice cooked cereal in there. So like wheat feed, for example, grass meal is another one, linseed, wheat feed. Those are all really nice, nutritious ways of getting energy into your horse without making them fizzy. So the first thing I do before you go out and buy a supplement and add it to a diet that might not be quite the right way around, look at what you're feeding, pull back a bit, keep it all simple, look at the ingredients that are on the bag and make sure they're the right ones for your horse. And my first thought would be that if you're having behavioral problems, I would have a look at what you're feeding and either drop down to a lower energy level or for example, give us a ring and we can work out which feed would be best for your horse. But yes, you might find that you're on too high an energy level and then just drop to a lower energy level. Or if you're feeding, as I said, feeding a feed with molasses in it or any whole grains, things like barley, for example. What might have worked, 5-6 years ago for your horse and might have been fine, just might not be the right thing anymore. So that's where you need to have a look at what's in the ingredients.
Great. Okay, and then we've got another question. Any thoughts on a 31-year-old who has tied up in the past?
Yes, so anybody who's tied up, one of the first things I would do is, again, drop your sugars and starches right down. One of the horses I'm helping at the moment is a young warm blood. He's 7 and he has tied up. And what we've done is we've gone with a low sugar level. If he's 31 and he's still working, which he could well be, you can put oil in the diet if you need extra energy for exercise, or oil in the diet to help with body condition, that little extra level of fat if you need it. The other thing you can do is if you're in regular gentle work, is you might find you need a vitamin E and selenium supplement added on top of your diet. Vitamin E and selenium are added in all of our feeds, but if you find you need that little bit extra, or you've got a deficiency in your area, for example, in the soil, then you might want to add one of those, that combination of supplementation. But again, it goes down to getting starch out of the diet and swapping starch for oil when you need the energy for work or when you need that little bit of extra fat cover.
Okay, great. And another question, I'm feeding micronized linseed. Can I feed the rapeseed oil as well to help with weight gain?
Yeah, so micronized linseed is a really super one because that's a fairly recent addition to all of our horse feed larder. Because of course we used to have to boil it and do all sorts of things to it. So micronized linseed is a lovely one. You're getting both protein and also oil when you feed micronized linseed. If you're then adding oil on top, one thing I would say is make sure you're in regular work. Because oil, as I said, is quite nutritious. It's also very nutrient dense. The micronized linseed will help with a nice shiny coat as well as the extra protein. And also you're getting a little bit of extra energy there as well. Yes, by all means, you can feed it. The sort of amounts I would recommend for a horse that's otherwise holding its weight well, as I said, I usually start at around 50 mils for oil, any kind of oil in the morning, and add it about 50 mils in the evening, and then build gradually from there if you need to. And with micronized linseed, keep it simple. You're looking at half a coffee cup in the morning and half a cup in the, for supper time, and then gradually build up. So you're starting at around 100 grams and building up to say 250 grams. But as I said, these are quite calorific ingredients that if you were, say, adding that to Veteran Light, that's absolutely fine, go for it. But keep an eye on the energy that your horse has got, and also the general condition, because it's an awful lot easier, and this goes for any species, to put weight on than to have to take it off.
Cool. Okay. And my 28-year-old struggles with hay or haylage, so I have started to feed soaked mashes as hay replacer. How do you recommend feeding overnight when stabled? I'm concerned about the length of time between feeds or her eating too much at once if I give enough for the whole night.
Okay, so first off, keep her in as for as short as time as possible. We find that even when horses have trouble with front or back teeth, especially ponies, they seem to be incredibly capable of grazing and getting something in. You mentioned that your horse is having trouble with any kind of long stem forage or with haylage. So the first thing I would say is we're able to suggest fast fiber as a partial fiber replacer. But we're not able to suggest it as a full fiber replacer unless you go through your vet. So if you were phoning us and speaking to us, the first thing we would have to say to you is please speak to your vet first and okay it in order to use fast fiber as a full forage replacement. From a partial fiber replacement, you're looking at it as dry weight, kilo for kilo. So you're weighing it before you add the water. And you could, for example, put it in 2 or 3 tubs in the stable, so that your horse has to move from one to the other. You could make it quite sloppy, so quite soupy with warm water, just to slow them down a bit. As I said before, some horses have a nice greedy appetite and will eat anything. Some pick and choose and take a while. So that's where, for example, you could make one bucket taste particularly minty, another one you could finely grate a carrot, mix it in, another one you could finely grate an apple, just to keep things a little bit different. And that would be a nice way of providing some forage overnight. And I would say that if you're having trouble and you're finding your horse is quitting, and quitting by that I mean that they give it a really good go to chew whatever they've got in their mouth, and then they end up spitting it out. Spitting it out's fine. It's when they try and swallow it and they end up choking, which is of course not what anybody wants. So if your horse really is having trouble with that, then don't keep offering that long stem forage. Go to the short stemmed, which would be the fine forage that you'd get from fast fiber, and use that route as a way of providing keeping the forage levels up in the diet. And the other thing a soaked feed will do, and this you can find with horses who are not so capable of chewing, is sometimes they're not drinking enough, and then you end up with gut problems anyway. So by providing a soaked feed, you're helping with those potential gut issues. You're keeping the water volume up in the digestive system. So my suggestion would be use a couple of buckets in the stable, something like fast fiber. Speak to your vet first to make sure they're okay with you using more than partial forage replacement. And you're looking at, in terms of replacement with fast fiber, it's a kilo for a kilo. So a kilo of fast fiber, that's a dry weight, would replace a kilo of hay. Keep in mind with haylage, sometimes that can have up to 50% moisture in it. So if you were feeding nothing but haylage before, you need to accommodate for how much water was in there.
Great. Okay, and the last question that we've got at the moment is about biotin. Our farrier and vet recommend biotin for hoof growth. Do your feeds contain biotin?
Yes, our feeds do contain biotin. If your farrier has recommended that, then by all means find a nice supplement that's got additional levels of biotin in it. I would say that if you've got hoof problems, make sure that you're feeding the right level of ingredients in your prepared feed. So ours, for example, have a nice balance and required the healthy balance of all the vitamins and minerals that are required. but also keep in mind that biotin is naturally occurring in grazing and hay anyway. So it's not generally thought that there will be a deficiency in biotin, but by all means, if you feel that biotin, zinc, methionine, all of those ingredients are going to help, then it's worth a try. And there are products out there that can be helpful. But first check to make sure that what you're feeding is a balanced diet. And as I said, our feeds are balanced. So, you know, double check that what you're feeding the correct amount.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Emily. That's all the questions that we have at the moment. Have you got, are you sort of finished, or have you?
Do you want me to wait around for a bit to see if anyone has any further questions?
We could give people a couple more minutes. Any other questions, just type them in the box.
Just to reiterate to everyone that we're more than happy if you give us a ring in the office. My number's at the bottom there. We have a team of people, and we're very happy to help out. If you haven't got your question now, or you don't want to ask your question now, you want to ask it later, just give us a shout, and we're more than happy to help. And as Hannah mentioned, we're happy to give you some advice. Choose the best feed for your horse, and we can send out some palatability samples for you to try.
Perfect. Okay, well, we haven't had any more questions in, so I think that is probably all of them. But thank you so much, Emily, for your talk tonight. It's been really good, and hopefully everyone found it really useful. I know I certainly did. And thanks everyone for attending. This has been recorded, so we'll just get the link sorted out. And then if you want to watch it again or share it to your friends, then they can watch it as well. But yeah, thanks so much, Emily.
You're most welcome. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Good evening, everyone.